The Druid tank has been through some ups and downs over the course of BFA, and right now it's the third best tank in Mythic Palace, but also one of the least played tanks, so let's show the bear some love. But wait, you still need talents, gear, essences, rotation, and a bit more on the side so you can get your furry little tushy able to tank some raids in dungeons. Awkward. Transition now! If you like our stuff and you want to know how this is all done behind the scenes, then after you check this video, check our new channel, This is Living, where we have talks about life experiences, improving yourself, and general good vibes, and might be something bonus for you because don't you worry, this is not going to take away from our regular WoW content, but might be something more humane that you might be interested in. So let us know. But with that being said, let's go into the talents. If you're just starting your bear journey and you want it to be bearable, then go with Bristling Fur for raids. It generates a crap ton of rage, giving you as many iron furs as you will need, and essentially provides you with a safety net of rage that you can use depending on the situation. For Mythic Plus, the ideal option is Blood Frenzy, making your Thrash generate tons of rage, which compensates the extra damage you will take from large packs of mobs, especially on larger keys. These options aim at providing you with the necessary rage to comfortably deal with encounters. If you're a bit more comfortable and have some gear, you can then swap to Brambles for both types of content. It has a defensive absorb mechanic that starts to really matter with higher levels of versatility, but also provides the most DPS output on the row, which can be good when you start to be tankier and require less healing. Second row is a utility row, and here the rule is pick what you can get the most use out of. In raids, you won't get more use from something other than Wild Charge. It's a very good gap closer considering you don't really have a lot of mobility without actually getting out of bear form, which should only be done when you are 100% sure you won't take any damage, because essentially you will be a DPS tanking the boss, which, I mean, you shouldn't be a rocket scientist to figure out you will die if that happens. In dungeons, however, you can take Ursol's Vortex. It helps when you need to kite mobs on specific affixes or simply to survive a pack. You can also combo it with Typhoon to make a pseudo grab and gather all of them fools together. Moving to the third row, here is what makes a druid apart from everything else. Restoration Affinity is the option you should start with when getting into bear. It provides you with a passive healing which adds up in long fights, and also with a few healing spells that can come in handy when you can shift out of bear form and not have anything attack you for that time. Balance Affinity provides you with more range that can be helpful in AoE situations to reach packs that are not very tight together. Not a lot of instances in BFA where this can be better than the other two though. And speaking of the devil, Feral Affinity gives you extra damaging abilities in cat form and some passive move speed. This talent is a bit more advanced in the sense that you can realistically only shift into cat when raid tanking, and your co-tank is the active tank. And, very important to underline this and, you will not take damage almost at all since your mitigation is pretty much zero. In exchange, you get to deal more damage and add to the raid DPS output, speeding up the boss kill. This is usually done if you know the fight and your group really needs the extra damage, since the risk of you messing this up can lead to a potential raid wipe. Next up is another utility role with the same mindset as the previous one. Keep this tier in mind, especially moving into the next raid, because the options can change based on what your group needs. Right now, Typhoon is the only solid option, mostly in dungeons, since there aren't a lot of situations in raids where you want to push ads away from you. As an example, last year you could have taken Mass Entanglement to stop boss ads from moving through the raid. So keep this tier in mind and change depending on what you want to accomplish. The fifth row is a row with valid options, all of them. Galactic Guardian will probably be your most used option when you don't know what to pick. It procs Moonfire on targets you damage and makes your next Moonfire you cast deal extra damage and generate rage. This adds an extra active button to your rotation that doesn't cost rage to use and boosts your DPS. Soul of the Forest is an option that can help you survive single target encounters like raids that will hit you very hard, making your Mangle deal more damage and generate more rage consistently, as opposed to Galactic Guardian that has a proc chance. Incarnation is a big cooldown that offers you marginal damage reduction but boosts your offensive prowess considerably every 3 minutes. It also makes your Grawl have a really short cooldown, which is a very niche thing, but something you might want to know for the off chance it could be useful. The sixth row gives you Earth Warden that has a general use across the board. It reduces the damage of the next melee that hits you by 30% after you thrash and can stack 3 times. The other two options have some niche and unique builds that are interesting to play with, but don't see a lot of usage at the high end and probably have less universal consistency. But hey, feel free to sink your claws into them. Last row is similar as before. One good overall option and a few niche. Rend and Tear is what you want almost all the time. Since you can stack Thrash 3 times, you essentially have a constant 6% damage reduction from all affected targets. Again, making this good in raids and dungeons alike. Although not all mechanics seem to work with this one. In which case, if you still find yourself taking more damage than you'd like, take Pulverize, keeping in mind it provides a bit more damage reduction with the added fact that it should work in all situations, but you will lose some of the damage output and it's a little bit awkward on the rotation. When you think of stats for your bear, you really want to think of either survivability or DPS output. Survivability should normally be your top priority, especially if you're pushing hard content that can kill you if you mess up. You can aim at doing more damage once you have a decent amount of gear and experience. You want to aim at eye level first, meaning agility, stamina, and armor, with versatility second, followed by mastery, with crit and haste lower down the priority list. This will maximize your tankiness since versatility makes everything you do better. If you want to go for more damage and a more rounded up build, or are simply more comfortable on bear, go with, well, eye level at the top still, followed by versatility, then haste and mastery pretty much equal above crit. Although this is a tank stat priority for damage output, you can still sim your character to see what stats are better, but the simulations will not factor in how much survivability you lose or gain in the slightest, so be very mindful of that. And now, with a better knowledge of stats, you should have an easier time deciding on your gear. But when it comes to trinkets, there are actually a few that are vastly outperforming the rest. Bloodthirsty Urchin from Lady Ashvane and Edict of the Faithless from the Queen's Court will be your best picks. They play on your strengths of self-sustain through self-heals and damage absorption, and scale with versatility, which again is your best stat. You can also get the Alchemist Stone if you are lacking the ones mentioned. It's a bit of a work to get at a decent eye level, but as someone who has been pretty much farming Queen's Court for the past 2 months and still doesn't have Edict, it's sometimes faster to get the stone. And since we are talking about gear here, let's check some of the traits that the wonderful Azrai system has in store for you. There are a few traits you should aim for, but not the only good ones. Certain traits like Undulating Tides provide massive damage increase, but it falls off for 45 seconds if you dip below 50% of your HP, which can happen. Most traits you will see bears run will be off-spec traits that you need to switch your specializations to get, all aiming at increasing your damage. That's mostly because at high eye level, bear is pretty tanky, and having more damage also kills the boss quicker, meaning you don't end up having to tank as much damage as you would otherwise. In raids, to be as beefy and tanky as you can be while also dealing decent damage, you want to get Twisted Claws 3 times. One layered main is amazing for the chance to get extra Iron Fur stacks, and one Burst of Savagery works wonders as well. The mastery component stacks, which you can work with, but the extra chance to proc gore does not stack, which is what you want first of all. The last trait can be almost anything, either stack some of what I mentioned before, or play with one of the generic stat traits or power of the moon that you need to switch the balance for, so your moonfires deal more damage. In dungeons, one of the strongest defensive builds you can use that works really well across the board is Twisted Claws 3 times, again, and this seems to be one of the best bear traits by the way, and Masterful Instincts stacked as much as you can. You honestly have a lot more freedom, however, I do see top bears use as many trait combinations as there are bears doing keys. You can swap out Masterful Instincts for the feral trait Wild Flesh Rending for a lot more AoE damage, and you can weave in the defensive traits we talked about earlier, like Layered Mane. The builds we offer are to form a frame of reference for you, but do feel free to test out different combinations since they alter your playstyle slightly, and maybe you can find something that works better for you that way. Same thing can be said about essences, although we will still give you some combinations to work with, so bear with us. In raids, the essence build that performs the best at the moment is focused a bit on DPS, and that's because Crucible of Flames will be your major. With a caveat, you can use Crucible on yourself for self-healing as well, which I guess it can be considered a defensive option as well. Pair this up with Nullification Dynamo and Conflict and Strife as minors, and you will have the tankiness you need to tackle the boss. There aren't a lot of damage dealing essences for tanks, and in terms of defensive majors, usually they are a bit underwhelming, or the strong window of defense they give you can easily be replaced by a personal cooldown, making it more of a waste when you could have dealt more damage and end the fight quicker. In dungeons, you can opt for Anima of Life and Death as a major. This synergizes really well with bear since you already have a huge health pool and rely to a large extent on self-sustain. Make big pools and pop this and you will be good to go on healing back up and on DPSing the pack down, consequently having a large DPS output as well. The minors are the same with Conflict and Strife and Null Dynamo, but Aegis of the Deep as a replacement, if it's at a higher rank, can work great when you just need versatility in AoE. Although the build itself assumes you are using these at rank 3 since there is a big power gap between rank 2 and 3, which can make certain choices change in this situation. A worthy mention here, something that could see even more play in 8.3 is the Vision of Perfection Major, specifically in dungeons since the damage intake is higher there. You can keep the normal minors but swap the Major for Vision of Perfection. The Major gives you incarnation procs that over the course of a long combat phase, which happens in high-end content, will add up to quite a bit of value. Pair this with the Survival of the Fittest talent and your Survival Instincts cooldown will be drastically reduced. This way you have incarnation procs around 1 per minute, faster recharge rate of Survival Instincts, and big tankiness phases during the 30 seconds after the cooldown wears off because of the traits. This build is still being played with, so the meta hasn't established itself around it yet, but is seeing more and more use the closer we get to 8.3 and could be the new kid on the block. But enough about this, let's check the rotation, and hey, you can also check those notification marks so we can get our videos faster to you in your feed, and it also really helps the channel out. When it comes to boss tanking, there is a basic priority for your abilities you want to strive for, but like many other tanks, you need to adapt to what happens and weave in your mitigation, for which there isn't a priority, so to speak. Keep Moonfire up at all times as the most important priority ability. Cast Thrash to reach 3 stacks on your target. If you expect it to pulverize, use it next once the target has 3 stacks of trash on it. Use Mangle to generate rage and deal single target damage as well. Consume Galactic Guardian procs as they pop up. And next up, use Thrash as your next best rage generation and fill in with swipes. If you are in an AoE environment fighting multiple targets, you want to thrash and swipe above most other things. Consume Galactic Guardian procs and try to moonfire as many targets as you can when it happens. Mangle will only be viable if you have an Incarnation proc, either from the actual cooldown or if you're running the Vision of Perfection. Otherwise, you are better off excluding Mangle, even more so if you're running the Wild Flesh Rending traits. When using cooldowns, it's ideally to use them on intense damage intake to save as much mana for your healers, if not to actually get you to stay alive, you silly goose. That was barely a joke. Bark Skin will be your minor defensive, up for a long time, but doesn't reduce as much damage as your major defensive. It can help on magic damage intake, especially if it's a prolonged time. Use this freely over the course of the fight. Survival Instincts is or are your major defensive, considering you have 2 charges. It reduces the damage intake by 50%, which is a very huge damage reduction, but lasts for only a short while. You usually use this for specific boss hits that hit you very hard for 1 or 2 consecutive swings. Other than this, it depends on what you talented to have more defensives outside your normal mitigation provided by Iron Fur, which you can stack, but stacking it does not refresh the duration, only adds another stack that expires on its own. Frenzied Regeneration is your other rage spender, although a lot cheaper. It regenerates 32% of your health bar over 3 seconds and has 2 charges. The heal is massive, and maximizing it can get you some healer love, and we all need some healer love. When not actively tanking, assuming you are not cat weaving, spend rage on mauls to aid with the DPS, although it's smart to still keep a bit of rage pooled to use once you switch or if shit hits the fan. Since versatility scales better and better the more you have it, your consumables should focus on it, unless you really know what you're doing by replacing it. Use a Cord of Versatility with 1 Leviathan's Eye of Agility and Versatile Dark Opals in the rest of your socket slots. For the weapon, you have some tanky options, although Force Multiplier is universally good, specifically since you also want to deal a bit more damage. But feel free to change it if you feel you are taking a lot of damage and you ran out of ways to mitigate it. The flask and potions should be agility focused, again since you cannot go wrong with agility, it being a very strong stat for both offense and defense. Same thing for food. The feast will give you more power from a point-by-point perspective, but we all know you cannot always pop feast for everything, so having some biltong for that 93 versatility will be your next best option. The guide that we do focuses more on the basic aspects of Guardian Druid, so there's still a lot more things that you can get into, and we recommend checking the Dream Grove Discord channel for that, where all the best bears in the world gather. And speaking of the best bears in the world, shout out to Pumps, a very special bear in our hearts, for helping us with the guide, feedbacking it, proofreading it, and suggesting a couple of things that we might not have been able to figure out on our own. Pumps, you rock, my man. And you can of course check Pumps at twitch.tv/pumpsm8 or pumpsmate. He streams raid progression, so there's some interesting things going on there. And speaking of interesting things, dear Patreons, a letter from the heart. We love you so much for the support. The holidays are coming pretty soon, and you guys being with us give us a level of comfort and ease that we really appreciate and helps us create more content without being too stressed about the whole YouTube shenanigans. So thank you very much. And hey, if you are also interested in supporting our channel a little bit more, then check our Patreon links down below, where you can, donate a little bit, as much as you're comfortable, or just stay subscribed to the channel, like the video, and that helps a lot. And hey, you might even find more class guides, more tank guides specifically, because I think we covered all of them at this point, depending on when you're watching this video. Maybe there's something for you. Thank you for watching the video, take care, and see you in the next one.